I want to say thank you for this opportunity to share with you about oral translation today. My topic is More Than Words, Oral Translation and Local Ownership. My name is Chris Toller. My family and I live and work in the state of San Luis Potosi in central Mexico. We work with the Central Pame, and we're currently working in an oral translation using Render. This presentation draws largely from our experiences working with the Pame, and our project is a seed company project working under the direction of UNTI, the Mexican Indigenous National Translation Organization here. I want to tell you the tale of two translations. Now, the same translator was involved in both of these translations. This translator is a very intelligent young woman in a Pame village in central Mexico. She has a high school education, which was remarkable at the time that this happened. Now it's more common to see people finish high school, but she was one of the first to do so. She also had experience reading and writing in Pame. Now, because of this, whenever anyone had a question about something and how it should be written in Pame, everyone looked to her. Because of that, when we first began talking about beginning this work of Bible translation with the community, everyone said that she would have to do everything. Now, she even began to do a written translation all by herself. When the team decided to translate the book of Jonah, she spent hours drafting Jonah all by herself. She worked until she was tired and she went to bed. She woke up the next morning, pulled out her draft of the first chapter of Jonah, excited, ready to read it. But as she looked at it, she had no idea what it said, even though she had just worked on it the day before. As you can imagine, she was discouraged. She carried the load all by herself because no one else knew how to write in Pame. Now, flash forward to just after the oral Bible translation training that our team did with the seed company. The team carried the entire book of Jonah through the whole translation process, including consultant approval. The translator that I mentioned previously spoke up during a team meeting afterwards. She said she needed to ask for forgiveness. She had left the translation project because she disagreed with the idea of doing an oral translation. She didn't think it was a real translation. She had rejoined the project in the meantime, and then now after she had experienced OBT, she said that she had to admit that it was better. Now, when I asked her why it was better, she said it was better because oral translation was not a burden like it was trying to do the written translation all by herself. Working together as a team made the task seem not so heavy. And also, the resulting translation was understandable and sounded more natural than the written one that she couldn't understand, even after having worked on it just the day before. So that brings me to the question, what is local ownership? Does it mean the same thing everywhere? We hear a lot about local ownership, but it can be a little bit slippery to define exactly what it will look like in every context. And I think that's a trap that we fall into. We want to have things that we can use a template and say, this is what it's going to look like here. And so this is what it's going to look like everywhere. But it should look different in each local context. We must be willing to look at each context individually to ensure that it is truly local. Now, I think this is a really interesting theme that we as a community of practice should explore more fully, but unfortunately, we're not going to have time to do that today. But we should keep that in mind. Now, according to the Common Framework Principles, local ownership serves the local incarnational expression of the church that owns the vision and responsibility for Bible translation. This means that more and more we want to see the local community owning the process of Bible translation. But like I said, it's going to look different in different contexts because it's local. So we need to keep that in mind. So how can an oral translation encourage local ownership? Through increased community participation, through community-made decisions, through local buy-in, through an increased desire to have the scriptures in the local language, through pride in the local product, and through organic sharing. We're going to look at these different points about how an oral translation can encourage local ownership. Oral translation encourages the active participation of the group. This is an important aspect of oral cultures. Oral cultures tend to be communal by nature. This means that the cultural norm is often to do activities communally rather than individually. Now, as with most things, this is a general tendency. It's not a cultural absolute, but having said that, I've seen that to be the case among the Central Pame. But I don't want you to hear me saying that this is always what oral cultures do. It's just a strong tendency. And so this is what we often see. The translation process utilized in an oral translation project taps into this desire for communal participation. In an oral translation, ideally, a team is working through every step rather than just an individual. Oral translation projects working in Render will often have a team that is divided into two sub-teams for different steps in the translation process. While the whole team often works on exegesis and internalization together as a large group, they divide into the smaller teams to draft and do peer review and other phases like that. But in every step of the process, there's still a sense of working in community. This encourages the translation team to feel a sense of ownership because everyone has an opportunity to contribute through their shared experience of working with the passage and arriving at a draft, as well as giving constructive feedback through peer review. I can remember in the early stages of doing our project that there were a lot of discussions, especially about key terms or difficult concepts. We would spend a lot of time just talking about how would you say this? How would you express this in Pame? And so this gave everybody an opportunity to be heard in the process. Now, we've also seen this sense of community ownership reflected in the community checking phase of the process. Oftentimes, when community checking happens, whole families will gather around to listen to the passage and even offer comments about it. People can answer correctly when the team has played different chapters after a church service and then ask comprehension questions. I remember at one such event, I saw 6 elderly people answering questions correctly. These were people that I had never heard speak in church before. These individuals never carry a Spanish Bible with them to church because they can't read. But when they heard the audio of the passage, they understood the passage and they were able to respond to all of the questions correctly. Now, this opens the possibility for them to participate in the church service in a way that has never happened before the team began working on the translation. A natural translation in a format that is accessible makes all the difference in the world. Now, an oral translation can also encourage local ownership by increasing participation from the community by means of removing or lessening some of the barriers that get in the way of local ownership. When we first began talking with the community about translation, many of the members of the community simply assumed they would not be able to participate because they could not read and write in Pame. Education in the Pame area is a more recent introduction. And because of this, many of the people in their 30s and older have a very limited education in Spanish. Everyone in the community told us that the one lady that I mentioned earlier in the story would be the only person involved with a written translation project. And that's pretty limiting. Now, this is because to be a good and skilled translator, it's necessary to not only know how to read in your native language, but you must be able to read and write well in both your native language as well as the language from which you'll be translating. Now, it's also been said that it's helpful to have lots of experience writing in your native language. Well, it takes time to develop readers and writers in a language that's never been written previously. This requires a good deal of effort from the linguists that's come to the area and also from the community and the people that are working on developing materials. Additionally, once the time and effort has been invested, you still don't know that the person that you've been training will be any good at it, or even if they want to continue doing it after they learn how to do it. So it's easy to see how this task would be viewed as a daunting one. However, Once we changed this conversation about doing a translation from a written translation to an oral translation, suddenly more people felt like they could have a voice in the translation. Removing the requirement to be literate to participate in the translation resulted in a translation team that had 6 members. Now, 3 of the members had a high school education, 2 had a primary school education, and 1 had no formal education at all. The oral translation process is also geared towards working in a team. As I mentioned previously, in an oral translation project that's using render software, ideally you have 2 teams with translators working on the translation. In our case, it's 2 teams of 3 translators working on each team. And this translation process is designed so that the teams work together in a participatory manner. The methodology that was taught to the team during the OBT training from Seed Company definitely focused on working together and utilizing oral preference learning styles. The internalization process is especially designed to be participatory and communally based. Now, making decisions in an oral culture is often a community activity. There is a lot of conversation to make sure that everyone's in agreement before making the decision. Throughout the life of the Central Pame Translation Project, the community has been involved in making decisions about the project. The community and the local church have made the decisions about whether or not they would participate in the translation project. They decided who the members of the translation team would be. When the scope of the project was decided, they made the decision about which books would be included. These decisions were not made in a vacuum. They were a result of discussions and collaboration with the resource and technical partners involved in the project. But the community was thoroughly involved in the discussion and in the decisions. So this oral translation allowed them to be involved because we were being intentional about it. All the different partners were being intentional about involving everybody in the process in order to have the community be the one making the decisions. Now, this also leads us to local buy-in. The project first started as an oral storying project, and initially we had a team of 5 men from several different communities that were selected by the church to participate in the story training. The team participated in the training and developed 19 different stories from the Old and New Testaments. Now, the organizers of the training were insistent that the local pastor, who had not been one of the storying team members and had not been involved in any of the previous trainings, it was important that he should participate in the final training, which was about how to use the stories for evangelism. They thought it was so important that when it looked like he wouldn't be able to come, they considered the possibility of us not even sending anybody from our team because it was so important that the pastor, the local pastor, be involved. So when the pastor was able to experience using the stories for the evangelism, he said, "Wow, this is easy. We should be using these stories to reach out to people in Pame." Now, it was funny because when we went to the training for how to use the stories for evangelism, we went out as a group. Part of our training was that we had to go out into the community and find people to listen to our stories. So we went out, the Pame guys and we went out, and I said, "Okay, we found somebody. We're going to ask them if you can tell the stories." And they said, "No, we want you to do it." So I said, "Okay." We went up together as a group and we found somebody outside of a grocery store, and we just asked if they would let us tell the stories that we had been learning in this training. And they said, sure, they had nothing else going on. So I shared the story, and then the team watched. And once they were able to see it in action and see how he reacted to the story, that was when the pastor said, "Wow, this is easy. We should be doing this." And so after that, he went to a taxi stand and got into the taxi and paid for the taxi driver to take him around just so he could tell him stories. So I just thought that was really interesting. But when we returned to the language area after the training, the pastor and his brother told one of the Pame stories during the church service. Afterwards, several different ladies from a neighboring village came and asked the pastor if he could teach them the stories so that they could share them with others in their community. Well, he said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then other people asked them. So what ended up happening was they created a storying group that met once a week, and the participants had to learn how to tell the stories, and then they would share them. So during the week, they would learn the stories, and then their homework was they had to go out and share those stories with others in the community. And once people in the community saw or heard the stories, they wanted to participate, and so more people came and wanted to participate in the storying. So this led us to a desire to have scripture in Pame. When we first arrived in the Pame area, the church leaders would read the Bible passage in Spanish and then attempt to explain it in Pame based on their understanding of the Spanish. But after the pastor participated in the training for how to use the Bible stories for evangelism, he began to say at the end of every single church service, I can't wait until we have the scriptures in Pame. Every single service, he would say this, I can't wait until we have the scriptures in Pame. And this would happen every single time. And so he was continuously telling people about it. And it just led to more and more people asking about when we were going to have the scriptures, when were we going to have it. And so he also would tell people, he told the entire church from the pulpit that they should join the translation team because he had learned more about the Bible through participating in the translation process than he ever had before. And so it was just really neat to see how not only the pastor, but different people in the church and in the community were engaging in this desire to have the scripture. Now, pride in the local product is another result that we saw from this oral translation. When the team finished the storying process, they had 19 stories from the Bible. And we took the audio recordings from 2 of the stories and set them to animated videos that I found on max7.org. If you haven't had a chance to visit max7.org, you should go check it out. Lots of great resources of videos and illustrations and audio and different things that are resources that you can use in your different languages and also just visual. It's really neat, good resource for things that are available out there. But when we took those and set the animated videos to Pame, I took the videos to the pastor's house to get his feedback. And his young daughter called out to her siblings and she was like, come quick, it's in Pame, it's in Pame. So we had these cartoons that were like 2 minutes long. But they were so excited because they were in Pame. These were the first cartoons that they had ever seen in Pame, and they would just watch the videos over and over and over again. The whole time that we were sitting there on the porch, they just wanted to watch it again, watch it again, watch it again. We ended up having to leave a copy of the videos with the pastor so that he could show them to his kids whenever they wanted them to. But we also had a team member who is an artist. And you can see from the picture here, he drew a picture of Jesus calming the storm, and we converted it into a puzzle. And we did the same with a picture that he did for Jonah. And so people got excited because they knew that these pictures were drawn by a local person. And we had mugs, we had puzzles, we had T-shirts, thermoses, anything that we could think of to print it on, we did. And people loved them. They wanted to have them because they really loved seeing this local product that was done by somebody from the Pame area. It was really exciting. Now, all of this led to organic sharing of the translated scriptures. When we first carried the animated videos to the other communities, we would show the videos and then ask if we could share the video with them. Often, to our surprise, they told us that they had already had the video. Someone had visited another village and shared the video via Bluetooth from their phone while they were at a party. So we would get there and ask, can we share the video? But someone else had already done it, and the video was sharing and going faster than we could because it was already there. And this happened more than once. Facebook. So one of the translation team members set up a Facebook page in order to share the videos. And on at least one occasion, I gave a ride to someone who had traveled back from the States for the funeral of a family member. And when I picked them up, we were driving along, they asked me if I had worked with the animated videos. And when I said that yes, I had, he said, "Oh, those are really cool. My sister shared them on Facebook. And so even though he was living in the States, he was able to see this video that his sister in Mexico had shared. And they were able to see the Pame Bible story there, even though they weren't in Mexico. So that was really neat. Now that we have more scripture that's been translated and is ready for distribution in the communities, the church has proclaimers that have been provided by Faith Comes by Hearing. The church has set up listening groups in different communities, and they're sharing the translated scripture in these listening groups. Now, sharing the translation orally removes the barrier of literacy and allows sharing right away. One of the things that takes a long time in the process of translation and distribution and publication is typesetting and publication. And those are good things, but they take time. With an audio translation or an oral translation that's being distributed by audio means, you can kind of bypass those short term, because you can, as soon as you have the approved scripture, the translation's been approved by the consultant, Faith Comes by Hearing, then they master it, clean everything up, and then they give it to us and it's ready for distribution. So right away, we're able to use it in the community rather than having to wait sometimes years at a time. And I'm not saying anything negative about the process. I know that it takes time, but it just seems like whenever you can do it in a way that allows the people to engage more quickly with it, you're just increasing the chance of engaging with the scripture. So in conclusion, oral translation and the resulting scripture products can encourage local ownership because it encourages increased community participation. It increases decisions being made by the community. It increases local buy-in, and it leads to an increased desire to have the translated scriptures, resulting in a pride in local products that results in organic sharing. We can encourage local ownership in the communities where we work by incorporating these ideas into the language projects. I hope that this has spurred some thoughts in your mind and that we can have a good discussion about it. Thank you.